Friday evenings are a little bit more difficult for people to tune in and ask questions. So we'll start, we'll start with a new time this week and next week. I'm wearing my Paris hat for a reason, because in June there's going to be an Investor Migration Council's annual forum, so annual conference, and this year it's taking place in Paris. I am going to be attending, and this is an amazing organization that brings together investment migration professionals from all over the world. So different international investment-based migration programs, whether it's Canada, the United States, the UK, Grenada, pretty much anywhere where you can obtain permanent residency or a passport through investment. Representatives and attorneys from those countries attend this conference, and we exchange information and kind of work on how to cross-refer. So if the United States program is not the right program for someone, that they can go, to look at other countries' programs and learn from each other, learn from our practices. Last year, their conference was in Dubai, and I was one of the speakers. This year, we're actually we're announcing a training program that IMC will roll out. So it's a training program for international agents and attorneys on the EB-5 program, and I was one of the authors for that program. So I'll be attending the conference, and we're gonna share that information that we rolled out a program through IMC that I happened to write. So I'm very excited. All right, the topic today, urban versus rural projects. Super important, and why one would choose one over the other. So let's talk about the different EB-5 projects that we have available and so-called targeted employment areas. So generally, as many of you may know, the EB-5 program has a minimum investment amount requirement. So an individual who's trying to obtain a green card here in the United States has to invest that minimum investment amount. The minimum investment amount differs depending on which area you are investing. If you just pick any area, the minimum investment amount is $1,050,000. So $1,050,000 is the minimum investment amount if you are not in a targeted employment area. However, the law says if your project is located in a targeted employment area, then your number one minimum investment amount is $800,000, and number two, there may be specific additional benefits depending on the area. So right now we actually have three targeted employment areas, 3 TEA zones. One is urban, but has a higher average unemployment rate than the national average. So we call them high unemployment TEAs. Another area is rural. So if you're going into an area with a low population density. And the last one is infrastructure. And I'll explain what each three means, because there's some misconceptions and misunderstandings about what they actually mean. And also I'll explain, once I explain what each one means, we will discuss into which one may be better for one person or another. So let's start with high unemployment area. The definition is if the census tract where your project is located, so a micro region, okay? A census tract is usually maybe a mile or two in radius, if that. Sometimes they're even smaller, sometimes they're a couple miles in radius. So census tract is not a whole city, it's not a whole state. Sometimes people will ask me, is Miami a high unemployment area? There's dozens of different census tracts. So there are parts of Miami that may qualify and parts that will not. So high unemployment TEA zone means that if your project is located in a census tract that has a higher than average unemployment rate and higher by 50%. So say if the national average unemployment rate is 7%, your area has a high average unemployment rate of 13%. then you're at least 50% over the national average. So you qualify for a high unemployment qualification under EB-5. So if you invest in a project located in that area, number one, you can invest $800,000. That's your minimum. Number two, you qualify for reserved visas that were for high unemployment tracks. So a super common misconception that people have is that if a project is located in a high unemployment census tract, that it is in economically depressed area. Factually, that's just not how it turns out to be. The census tract and employment data comes from the Department of Labor, and you will be surprised. Sometimes some of the most expensive real estate, for example, Wynwood in Miami, some parts of Manhattan in New York, absolutely qualify for high unemployment TEA. So it's a little bit of a game of luck on, who was polled in certain years, how people answered their questions. And in some areas, you have a lot of people who reside in expensive real estate, but there may not be a lot of jobs in that specific census tract. So it's hard to say how this data works, but high unemployment TEA does not mean that the area is economically depressed. Most EB-5 projects today, I would say probably over 97% of all EB-5 projects are located in some sort of TEA zone, whether it's urban, rural, or it's an infrastructure project. There are a handful of projects that are not in targeted zones, so they require an investment of $1.05 million, but the vast majority of projects we see on the market today, they are located in the $800,000 minimum. So number one, high unemployment TEA. So city project, but happens to qualify for the census tract. Number two, rural project. Rural project means you're investing in a project where the population of that specific also like census tract area is less than, I believe, 20,000 people. Don't quote me on that the exact number can be looked up, but low population density, that's something like an economist for a project would pull the data and see if it qualifies. But another also misconception is that if I am an EB-5 investor investing in a rural project, that I'm literally building something in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods, in the middle of a cornfield, or in some teeny tiny village. Again, rural qualification looks at year-round residents. So there are many EB-5 projects that qualify for the rural qualification, but they're actually in an area that has had a lot of development, such as Napa Valley, California, Aspen, and Breckenridge, Colorado. And the reason why they qualify for rural is because those areas may have a high visiting population. So they're high tourism areas, ski resorts, wineries, other types of, high tourism traffic areas, but they have a very low year-round resident population. So Park City, Utah is a great example. I think it has about 10,000 official residents, but millions of people go through Park City as visitors probably a year. So it is possible to invest in a project that is rural, but is still in a economically sort of thriving and active area. And that tends to be the kind of projects that we see in EB-5. So you have your high unemployment TEA, you have your rural qualification, and the third set aside is infrastructure. Infrastructure projects can be located anywhere, but if they meet the requirement of being infrastructure, so they're building something that represents infrastructure, whether it's, bridge, road, or some sort of public infrastructure, and they are operated, the actual job creating entity is operated by a government entity, then they will qualify for the infrastructure qualification under EB-5. So all three of those, rural, urban, and infrastructure, are the kind of projects that require only $800,000 in investment. So then that becomes, infrastructure projects are extremely rare. Like right now, as a broker, I have literally one project that we're able to offer. In the whole history since the infrastructure category has come out, I believe there has been less than 10 projects that qualified for infrastructure. So by default, we don't always have an infrastructure project we can even consider. So infrastructure is rare. We won't spend much time talking about that. Almost all EB-5 projects fall into urban or rural, urban TEA or rural TEA. So today the big question is, how do I pick and why should I pick? Today, as of April 2026, one of the main differences that affects absolutely every EB-5 applicant is that rural projects get priority processing. Priority processing means that an average review of the I-526 petition has been between 6 and 8 months. Some investors get reviewed even faster than that, some a little bit slower. But if we're looking at rural petitions that were adjudicated and filed in the last 22 years, we're seeing that the average processing times for rural petitions is about 6 to 8 months. Urban projects, not so much. There was a point where USCIS started to review urban petitions faster. Unfortunately, they slowed down quite a bit in 2025. So today, or I'm speaking in April of 2026, we're seeing average processing times for urban petitions are, a year and a half to 2.5 years. Much, much slower. So when you're looking at processing time, if it matters to you, if you are someone who is trying to obtain their green card sooner than later, if your status is expiring, if your kids are planning to start school. So if faster processing is important for you, then definitely rural projects is something for you worth considering, because average processing times is about half a year in those, where urban projects a year and a half to 2 years. Okay, then that's the main difference. The second main difference is that the visa set asides, so reserved visas that are reserved just for those categories, are also different. Rural gets 2,000 visa set aside numbers per year, urban gets 1,000. Does this matter to people who are not coming from high traffic EB-5 countries? I would say no, right? So if you are not coming from India or China, it probably doesn't matter for you, because in total we have 10,000 unreserved EB-5 visa numbers per year, and that tends to be enough to meet the needs of most of the countries that file for EB-5. However, because we have such a disproportionately large percentage of investors coming from India and China, the way these visas are allocated is any country that uses up more than 7% of the total kind of gets put in its own waiting time. So if you're an investor born in India, and it goes by country of birth, not your country of citizenship. So if you're an investor who was born in India or you were born in China, currently the unreserved EB-5 visa category has an additional wait time for you. So if you just go into an unreserved project or try to get an unreserved visa, there's a between 3 and probably 10 additional years that you would have to wait to get your green card, right? Because there are enough applicants who have applied in the past to use up these numbers. So the reserved categories, rural, urban, and infrastructure, are showing up as current on the Visa Bulletin, which is a special calendar that immigration publishes every month to let people know what expected wait times to have. So if you're not coming from India and China and you realize in the EB-5 program, you don't need to worry about this, because there's going to be enough unreserved visa numbers for you for years to come, right? However, if you are coming from India or China, like if you were born in India or China, you need to look at this. Look at the Visa Bulletin, and also look at the pending petition numbers that have been filed but have not gotten reviewed yet, because the Visa Bulletin shows you like the current situation. It doesn't show you the invisible line that already formed from petitions where investors invested and filed their petition, but they have not been adjudicated yet. So if we look at that invisible line, what we're seeing is for investors going into rural projects, not only are they very likely to get their petition approved in 6 to 8 months, but they're extremely likely to have their green card available, the visa number available to them, even if they're coming from India and China, within 3 years, right? So some people may even make it without a wait time. It's hard to know exactly who's going to have to wait longer, but investing today in a rural project, if you're born in India, you may experience additional wait time, but it seems like that additional wait time is going to fall between 1 and 3 years. Same with China. If you are investing, if you were born in China or India and you are investing in an urban project, that additional wait time could possibly be 7 or more years. And these are very, very just educated guesses on my part. It is nearly impossible to predict the exact wait time because it depends on not just the numbers that are pending today, but it depends on who is applying and how many people are applying in future years that are coming from non-China and India countries, because they will take the unreserved visa numbers. So that's why it's like an impossible thing to accurately predict. But I would say check out a blog called Chatting with Charlie. It's a YouTube podcast that comes out every month. The former visa chief, who was in charge of allocating these visa numbers and moving the visa bulletin at the DHS, he has retired. He is now in private practice, and he does this monthly blog called Chatting with Charlie, where he, with all of his 30-year experience and knowing how these visas are allocated, he looks at the numbers and he makes estimated predictions. And he will say, I expect that your wait time in this category is going to be this, and I expect that your wait time in this category is going to be that. So don't rely on me. Check out Chatting with Charlie, the blog, if you are an Indian or Chinese investor, and if you're debating between rural and urban projects. For the purposes of today's session, I'm going to summarize what pretty much every expert statistician has been saying. Today, if you're coming from India and China, if you're investing in rural projects, your expected wait time is much less than your expected wait time for your green card if you go into an urban project, right? Things could change. A year and a half from that, Congress could vote in additional visa numbers, could eliminate this issue. But if things don't change and we continue with the same visa allocations, the expected wait time in rural projects is maybe 1 to 3 years. The expected additional wait time in urban projects could exceed past 7 years. So that's something to factor in. So when I work with my investors, non-Indian, non-Chinese, so when I work with my Canadians, when I work with my Europeans, when we're picking between rural and urban project, the main difference is, okay, the green card through a rural project is likely going to come in a little after a year, 6 to 8 months for processing, and then either adjustment of status or consular processing is maybe another 6 to 12 months. And then in urban, we expect that the green card is going to come in 2+ years. So, and that's our point of consideration. So we look at both projects, we decide, if the client likes an urban project more, and if they're willing to wait extra time, then they'll go into urban. If they really, really love, or if they're indifferent to the projects, urban or rural, they really like a rural project, will move with rural. For my Indian-born and Chinese-born investors, the vast majority today are picking rural projects simply because of the uncertainty that may wait for them in processing times in urban. Now, it is important to understand that if you are based in the United States, so if you're here on an H-1B visa, for example, born in India or born in China, and you're deciding rural or urban project, even if you pick an urban project today and you file your petition, you can still file a concurrent adjustment. As of April 2026, the visa bulletin is current, meaning you can file your EB-5 petition, file a concurrent adjustment. The concurrent adjustment is going to entitle you to a work authorization and a travel authorization. And those can be renewed while you wait for your adjustment to be adjudicated, which again, if that takes 7 or 8 years, in theory, you can have this work and travel authorization for those years. Speaking as someone who practiced immigration law for many years, it may give you some security, but it's not a guarantee. The adjustment status and the work authorization and how timely they renew it can be fickle. And we have seen in the past that work authorizations expire and new ones take longer to approve. The renewal takes longer to approve, and there's a gap between when your work authorization expires and a new one gets approved. So it can affect your ability to work, because you may have gaps in work authorization over those years. The travel authorization is also discretionary, so depending on which administration we have and how harsh they are, traveling on this travel authorization is also not something everyone is comfortable with. So just keep in mind that, it is not, this pending adjustment status does not have the same rights that being a green card holder and lawful permanent resident does, right? It kind of grants you certain temporary privileges, but those may change and they're implemented different by different administrations. So depending how risk averse you are, obviously rural is a big point of consideration. So the bigger question that people will ask me today is, why would anybody even choose then urban projects? If rural gets processed faster, if we have more visa set-asides, the expected wait times are less, why would anyone at this point choose an urban project? And that has to do with the sort of strength in the financials of the project themselves. Because more investors are selecting rural projects today, many rural projects simply get filled up before they're even approved by USCIS. So when the project comes out, they do all the project documents, they file them with USCIS. USCIS takes 6 to 8 months on average to review the project documents and confirm that they believe that the project qualifies for the program. A lot of times, because of this demand for rural projects, a lot of times by the time we get the approval from USCIS, the rural project is already full. So today, again, April 26th, if I'm working with you and we're selecting from rural deals, out of pretty much all rural deals, I may only have 1 or 2 that already have USCIS approval. Versus on the urban side, those projects have been getting filled up slower. So I still have projects that already filed their documents with USCIS last year, got approved, and they still have investor spots to pick from. So a lot of times, the investor has an option of going into an urban project that is further along in construction, that has already been approved by USCIS, and that has less time on the investment timeline left, versus a rural project that is in earlier stages of construction, doesn't have USCIS approval yet. So there's a financial component that comes in where some investors may feel like certain urban projects that are available today grant them more protection on both, construction timeline financial perspective and also immigration wise, because the project has been approved, versus with rural projects, they may have to roll the dice and select a project that either doesn't have USCIS approval or has a longer financial timeline. So that's why, despite the processing times, I have quite a few investors who still select certain urban deals, because there's other benefits to specific projects that some rural projects don't have today. So, but that being said, the good news is we do have rural projects at least one right now that I can think of, and hopefully soon two more, that do have USAS approval. They are rural and they're under construction. So we do have rural projects to select from. We do have urban projects to select from. So if you are looking at this program and you're trying to file your petition by the September 30th deadline when the grandfathering protection expires, we have both choices. And as always, when I speak to my clients, we look at different choices and we discuss the pros and the cons of each. So you can make a decision that works best for you, because there's no one right answer for every investor. Some investors do not care about the time. They have more time. They care more about the financial structure and how far along the project has moved along. So we can focus on that. Other investors must really choose a rural project that is 956F approved. So we will focus on those options, but we do always try to have a choice, and we're always looking at new projects and always onboarding new projects so that our investors can make choices that work for their particular situation. But that's in general. Hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to summarize. The takeaway is the main difference between urban and rural projects today, April 2026, is urban projects are, they tend to get reviewed. The individual investor petitions get reviewed slower, a year and a half to 2 years. And for investors from backlog countries like China and India, there is also an additional substantial wait time before you can get a green card. On rural deals, they're getting much faster priority adjudication, as Congress intended, about 6 to 8 months on average for most I-526 petitions. They have more reserved set-aside visa numbers, so the wait time for the green card may be shorter. And there are still, many rural options that are available. Not all of them already have USAS approval, but there are many options available. I look forward to working with you if you guys do need professional guidance through the project selection. And if you have questions about this live, or if you have suggestions for future lives and topics that you want me to cover, please put your comment in the comment field or send us a message. And of course, hit like if you found the session informative. Hit like. We'll be back next Friday, Eastern time morning, either 10 or 11. We're going to post that very soon. And if we're on the West Coast, that's going to be early morning for you. So probably 7 or 8 a.m. And for European clients or clients in Asia, that's going to be more in the evening hours of Friday. Thanks so much for your attention. Bye.